Hello and welcome to this Grattan Institute webinar. I am Amy Haywood. I'm the Deputy Program Director of Grattan's Education Program. It is National Reconciliation Week and I come to you today from Wurundjeri lands. I want to at the start acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations people on whose traditional lands we all meet and work and whose cultures are among the oldest in human history. This conversation today is about implementing a tiered intervention approach to catching up struggling readers, and it follows on from a recently released Grattan Institute report called The Reading Guarantee: How to Give Every Child the Best Chance of Success. To talk about what this looks like in practice, I'm really excited and delighted to be here with three special guests: Kirsty Amos, Christine Darcy, and Stasha Demosthenous from Parafield Gardens High School in the suburbs of Adelaide. Kirsty is the school principal, Christine is the in-school speech pathologist, and Stasha is the school's literacy coordinator. Thank you all very much for being here. For this conversation, I will just quickly do a bit of scene setting on what our report was and what it was about. Then we will hear from Kirsty, Christine, and Stasha on how they've implemented that tiered intervention approach in school, and we'll have some time at the end for question and answer as well. We do have some pre-submitted questions that people have already given us, which we can start with, but please, I encourage you in the chat, if you put any questions in, I can respond to some while we're going, but we can leave some of them also for the end of the conversation. So we wrote this report, Grattan's Reading Guarantee Research, and one of the key findings that we had from that report was that Australia has a reading problem. So we're failing to teach reading well, and students are unfortunately paying the price. About 1 in 3 Australian students are not proficient in reading across the country. This finding is based on the new NAPLAN proficiency benchmark, which sets a bar for the expected outcomes a student should be achieving. It is a higher bar than the old national minimum standard, which was accepted as too low, but it is not particularly stringent. So, for example, a Year 9 student could just scrape by at proficient if they are working 2 years below the average Year 9 student, so at the level of a Year 7 student. And we know, unfortunately, proficiency is important because students who lack proficiency are likely to have a much harder time keeping up with the curriculum, and learning gaps can widen further. And we know that that's an issue, particularly for disadvantaged students. It is important to remember, of course, that 20 to 25% of advantaged students also struggle with their reading, but on the whole, the situation is much worse for disadvantaged students. Now, measuring disadvantage is a complex thing to do, but NAPLAN data tells us that about half of students in regional and remote areas are not proficient, and 60 to 70% of First Nations students are not proficient. And when we look at student outcomes for family educational, based on family educational outcomes, so like we have on this chart, we can see there's this huge gap that opens up in reading ability over time based on whether your students whether students' parents didn't finish high school compared with those students whose parents went to university. So in grade 3, you can see that gap is about 1 year, but it grows to a huge 5-year gap by the time those students are reaching Year 9. And that's the opposite of what we want our schools to do. We want to close those equity gaps, not make them much wider. And one of the reasons why we know that's happening is this something called the Matthew effect, which is based on that biblical saying, the rich get richer while the poor get poorer. In terms of reading, what that means is you'll see students that really struggle early. They're likely to find things harderable, reading is less enjoyable, and as a result, without intervention support, they're likely to read fewer words, they'll pick up fewer books, and the effect compounds over time. And in contrast, students that learn effectively experience success early, enjoy their reading, read more words, pick up more books and more knowledge over time and vocabulary. It's a self-reinforcing process. And it's really up to schools to disrupt that process that sets students on that lower pathway. And it's something that's important not just for individuals, but for Australia at large. We do know that the cost of reading failure is huge. We conservatively estimated that the cost to the country arising from those that are hardest hit, who end up dropping out of school as a result, is about $40 billion over the lifetime of those current day students. So that is the problem, which we set out in our report. The thing that we were interested in was what's driving that. And we do understand there's been decades of disagreement about how to teach reading in Australia, and that's muddied the waters, made it confusing for teachers, and led to this huge variation in practice across the country. But the research evidence is clear that a structured literacy approach is best. That includes a strong emphasis in the early years on systematic instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics, alongside exposure to rich literature through read alouds and explicit teaching to build vocabulary, fluency, and background knowledge. And as students master the ability to decode new words with lots of practice, ideally using things like decodable readers, they broadly switch from learning to read to reading to learn, ideally by the end of, say, grade 2. But students will still need a lot more help. The journey doesn't end there. A lot more work is needed in terms of explicit teaching that deepens their knowledge and vocabulary over time so they can comprehend what they're reading, which is the ultimate goal of reading. And this work needs to happen right through primary school and right through secondary school across all areas of the curriculum. Of course, students will work at different paces and some will need that additional support to help catch them up if they fall behind. And children tend to need less catch-up support if it's done earlier. So that close monitoring is really important. We're going to hear a little bit more about what that looks like in practice from our special guests today. But it is important to remember that, and I think it'll be clear when we hear from them, that this is really hard work. Every instructional minute really matters, particularly for our disadvantaged children, but it takes a lot organisationally within a school to get that systematic whole school approach happening. Now, our report sets out some recommendations for governments. So we recommend a 6-step reading guarantee strategy, and that's a comprehensive suite of reforms. We're encouraging governments not to pick and mix, but actually think about a reform package. And I'll go through just quickly what the 6 steps are. So the first one is targets. Given we know there's evidence that almost all students can learn to read when provided with high quality teaching and support, we recommend a long-term target of 90% of students reaching that NAPLAN proficiency benchmark, and over the next 10 years, a 15 percentage point improvement in those proficiency levels. We think that's achievable. Only 6 more Year 3 students per school would need to be proficient over 10 years. The second step is around guidelines. So we know that guidance to teachers can be wrong, it can be vague, or it can be inconsistent. So we're recommending governments develop guidelines that are built off that robust evidence base, and they're combined with those practical tools they need, like robust assessment schedules, validated lists of reading programs, so they don't have to build things from scratch themselves. Step 3 is about getting those materials into the hands of teachers by quality assuring them and subsidising schools to purchase them. Step 4, which we'll hear a little bit more about in practice today, is around screening and intervention support. We know that Tier 1 whole class instruction is essential, but so is that additional catch-up support, and that requires regular screening. So we're recommending governments require schools to do twice yearly screening in foundation to Year 2 and also screening on entry into secondary school so students don't fall through the cracks. Step 5 is really critical. It's about building teacher expertise, and there are a number of things in there, including in primary school, noting that it's a core part of teachers' role as literacy instruction. We think 25% of their professional development hours should be focused on that. We think every school, primary and secondary, should have a specialist literacy instructional specialist who's a classroom teacher but also can coach others. And we think there needs to be an investment in high quality micro-credentials and demonstration schools who can share best practice. Finally, step 6 is about monitoring, and one of the things we recommend is the mandation of the Year 1 National 40-item phonics screening check. It's an efficient test, it's a health check for the system, and we do think Year 3 NAPLAN, which is the first national measure of reading performance, is too late to wait to check on how students are going with their reading. So that is a very, very quick whirlwind tour of our report. Our focus is obviously on policy recommendations for government, but we know that schools is where the work, really important work, is happening on the ground. We already have some exceptional practice in our schools, and I'm so excited to be able to pass over to Kirsty, Christine and Stasha, who will be able to talk you through the approach at Parafield Gardens High School.
We'd like to start by acknowledging the Kaurna people as the custodians of the lands and waters of the Adelaide region from which we're presenting tonight, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Darcy, and I'm here with Kirsty Amos, our principal, and Stasha Demosthenous, our literacy leader. Kirsty, Sasha and I would like to start by acknowledging and saying thank you to Amy and the Grattan Institute team for this opportunity to share our journey with you, and hope it offers you some valuable insights into implementing a multi-tiered system of support in a secondary setting. We'd also like to acknowledge all the expertise and support we've received behind this piece of work that could not have achieved what it has without our leadership team, our teaching and ancillary staff, all working together to effect the changes and improvements we've seen over the last 3 and a bit years. So a big shout out and thank you to them. Hey, this evening we're going to very briefly look at our context and the impetus for change, our multi-tier system of support approach, our literacy screening process, our Tier 2 and 3 reading acceleration program, or RAP for short, our progress monitoring and outcomes, the lessons we've learned along the way that we can share with you, and time for a bit of a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to pass you over to Kirsty Amos.
So we are a fairly large school with many students coming from various places. We, in South Australia, will call it Category 3, which means that there is some social disadvantage. We have 1,250 students at the moment, slightly larger than when we started in the year. We have and we're really proud of this, a large 35% of our students come from a background where English is not the first language, and we have approximately 25% of our students that have a verified disability. And we're really proud that we offer lots and lots of different opportunities for young people to engage in learning. However, some of the challenges that our young people face means that reading is quite challenging for many. So what you can see in front of you now is just some demographic information about our home groups and their levels of literacy at the start of our journey. So some of our home groups had up to 1 in 6 students who were significantly behind in their reading, and an extra 2 that were pretty close to the line. But on average, it was 1 in 5 students who were below standard, and that's based on that plan and the progress achievement testing that we do as a state, but also as a school. In some classes, we were struggling with 2 in 3 students not at standard. And what we know is that when students can't read or struggle to read, they become disengaged very quickly and everything becomes much harder. So that means that sometimes they are unable to access the written word, but sometimes their behaviour is impacted. So even when they could potentially engage with oral and other activities, they either we go with the fight, flight, freeze response. So they either withdraw, they fight by being disruptive in class, or they withdraw. And again, what that means is progressively over time, the disengagement increases and their life, the risk to their life outcomes is significantly decreased. Oh, sorry, the risk is increased, but their chances of success just decrease exponentially. So while our staff were working super hard, and all of the staff at the primary schools were also working really hard at improving literacy, we knew that we had to do something differently, because this just isn't good enough for our young people. So we knew that we had to do something differently, and we'd been working really hard, but we weren't quite sure what to do. So we delved into the literacy guidebooks, and we consulted Christine and the speech pathology service to make sure that what we were going to trial had some research behind it. We started off with before, during and after reading strategies. So I've skipped a step. What we really base all our work on is the waves of intervention or the tiers of intervention. It depends which state you're in and which jurisdiction, but basically wave 1, tier 1 is what we do for all young people in all classes across the school. Wave 2 is what we do for an identified number, and wave 3 or tier 3 is for a very small number of students who wave 2 is not quite enough. So in 2021, we looked at the research and we thought that explicitly teaching young people what to do before they read something, while they're reading something, and after they've read something is really, really important. But it looks slightly different in science to English to technology. So as a whole school, we learnt about what that might look like in every class across the school, and people made commitments to do at least one formal before, during and after activity in every class, every term, to see if that would make a difference. At the same time, we looked at the science of reading. Not all teachers need to have a really deep practical understanding of the science of reading, but it's really, really important that everybody understands the theory so that when a young person is struggling in their class, they can identify what that's about. But also when they read the literacy screening reports, they actually understand the language within it and the recommendations that are made about what each and every one of us can do to support the young person that's struggling in each and every class. At the same time, what we were doing is at Tier 2, we were developing a curriculum and developing resources to support our Tier 2 classes. So the Tier 2 classes were where identified students from the screening were invited to participate in a small class. We try for 16. Some of the classes got up to 20, but that's really a bit of a funding issue. But also, if we know that there are students that are identified that need the intervention, we sometimes did have to have a slightly larger class, but also that class was supported by 1 or 2 SSOs, and all staff in the Tier 2 intervention had specialist training to ensure that the young people were being supported in the best way possible. But of course, the first time that you do anything, it's a bit bumpy. And we had, in that first year, we did have to develop resources that were more in line with adolescent young people, and to ensure that the engagement was there. We also had a very similar program. So there was a program for English speakers as their first language, and there was a program that was similar but not the same for students who had English as a second language. It was all, both programs were based on Sounds Right. So after the first year, we modified what we had done, but we didn't change the model, except for we added a third tier. We added the vocab instructional routine, and again, we used the whole school training model. What we discovered was that not everybody across the curriculum had been teaching the explicit vocabulary required, so at especially technical vocabulary that was required for young people to be successful in discipline-specific subjects. But we also knew that there were some people that were doing it really, really well, and some people that needed quite a lot more support. So Stasha led us through some training with Christine's support that allowed high levels of support, scaffolding and resources for those people for whom it was new, but allowed people that had expertise to adapt and modify the resources that were there to ensure that everybody got what they need. That was really, really successful. So in 2023, we continued that work, adding a level of Tier 3 intervention, because what we saw was that we were improving the whole, everybody's reading skills. So students that were already good at reading were improving, and those students that were really struggling were improving. And I think Christine will talk a little bit later, but what we were super pleased about was that the equity was improving, because the gap between the highest achieving students and the lowest achieving students was greatly reduced. So we were, again, very excited about that. This year, well, at the end of last year, we asked people how confident they were, expecting them to want to continue to focus on vocabulary. But in actual fact, what we discovered was people were really confident about that because of the level of support and training that they had received, and they were ready to maintain all the work that we had already done, but add the specific and explicit teaching of writing through sentence structure. So we're very pleased with the work to date. So this is just a different way of looking at the waves of intervention. I won't talk too much about it because I think Stasha is going to refer to it a bit later on. But again, you can see that there are some things that we do for all students, some things that we do for a smaller group, and again, some that we do for a much smaller group. Interestingly, at our school, we our percentages of students that are challenged are significantly higher than the national average. So we have about 25% of our young people in the Tier 2 interventions. And now I'm handing over to Stasha, who will give you some information about the practicalities of being successful in this program.
So the screen or the slide that is just popped up on your screen now is a screenshot of what our vocabulary instruction routine looks like, VIR for short. So we introduced this strategy to staff last year to support them in explicitly teaching vocabulary to their students. So this is a Tier 1 strategy implemented whole school, and it has been adjusted and modified to suit year level as well as learning area and context. And it's essentially a set script or routine to teach the meaning and use of unknown words, go into entomology and morphology, and there's some checking for understanding on the board there. I'm going to take you through the transition screening process first, and then we'll jump back my way for the program.
Okay, literacy screening is a core component of our system of support approach. We want to know which students need support with reading and language comprehension, because these skills are critical for being successful at high school. If we know a student has reading and or language comprehension difficulties, we can offer intervention to improve their reading skills and differentiate our instruction to make the language of the curriculum more accessible to these students. Students can be identified for literacy screening on transition to high school or throughout the year by their teachers across all year levels and subject areas. This slide illustrates the timeline for our literacy screening process for students transitioning into high school, and we review our process each year to make sure it's capturing the students we need to capture while minimising the resources and time needed to undertake screening for large numbers of students. So at the end of term 2, our feeder primary schools screen their Year 6 students' reading skills using the DIBELS 8 and share their data with us. From this data, students at risk are identified for further screening in term 3, and parents can opt out if they don't want their child screened. Following screening, students are assigned to a reader profile based on the simple view of reading quadrants. So the reader profile 1, students have good language comprehension and good word reading skills. Reader profile 2, poor language comprehension, good word reading skills. Reader profile 3, poor language comprehension, poor word reading. And reader profile 4, good language comprehension, poor word reading. Students identified with a decoding age of 10 or below, with or without language comprehension difficulties, will be enrolled in our Tier 2 reading acceleration program. And on average, over the last 4 years, that's been 1 in 4 of all Year 7 enrolments, students transitioning to high school. Students with good word reading skills but poor language comprehension receive quality differentiated teaching practice in their mainstream classes, and some will also be enrolled in our Tier 2 English as an additional language program if they're still developing their proficiency in English. And students also have access to text-to-speech and speech-to-text software on their school laptops. Then in late term 3, screening results are shared with each student's family, and this is also when decisions are made about timetabling, class allocations and staffing. And in term 4, during a transition visit, all students complete the new group reading test, and those results are immediately available to our teachers to inform their planning for the following year. And finally, at the beginning of year 7, the Tier 2 and Tier 3 reading intervention teams come together to plan for the term and the rest of the year, and student screening results are shared with their Year 7 teachers, who are given time to consider how they'll differentiate the learning for those students. Here's an example of the reader profiles for our current Year 7 students who had their word decoding and language comprehension skills screened prior to transition. It shows just over 1 in 2 students had poor decoding skills in common, while 47% of students screened had poor language comprehension skills in common, justifying the need for our screening program and tiers of intervention. This figure B6 on page 86 of the Reading Guarantee Report, it outlines the screening tools we use, our decision-making pathways and our intervention criteria for literacy, following literacy screening, for those of you that are interested in this level of detail. And you'll also find a summary of the screening tools we use, what they measure, who can administer them, when and how long they take to administer, on page 88 of the Grattan Institute's Reading Guarantee Report. And now I'm going to hand you back over to Stasha.
So these next few slides, we're going to dive into RAP, which is short for Reading Acceleration Program. So that is our Tier 2 Reading Intervention Program. So we have RAP classes that run weekly. We have one 80-minute session and one 40-minute session in the week. The reason why we've ended up with this session combination, or the minutes within this session, is because our timetable is 4 lessons a day at 80 minutes. So obviously you've got to work within the timetabling structure. Our RAP classes are not streamed. So students in RAP have a decoding age at or below 10 years. So currently we have students in the RAP program with a decoding age ranging from 6 to 10. So as you can probably imagine, that's quite low, coming in at year 7 with a decoding age as low as 6. All of our RAP teachers have been trained in the Sounds Right program, which is a structured synthetic phonics program based on the science of reading. We base RAP off of Sounds Right. And we have added morphology to our RAP program. So in order to be able to teach morphology, we obviously had to upskill our staff in their knowledge of morphology and their ability in terms of morphology instruction. And we tried a couple of different teaching models, and we currently use a team teaching model, which is essentially 2 RAP teachers and 2 SSOs in the room, all of whom who have been trained in the Sounds Right program. We have found this to be the most effective model. Reason being, if you are away, you know that your fellow teacher is going to be there to keep the program going. We found that when you're with a single teacher, when you're away, the program just kind of went at a standstill, because it's such a specialized program. You can't ask a TRT or a new teacher to come in to teach phonics without the training or the knowledge. So that team teaching model is really good to combat that. Plus also you've got the 4 trained adults in the room, which means that you can spread your expertise across the class. And also it allows you to split up into little different groups. So it's more targeted instruction for the kids. So in addition to having our Tier 2 intervention program, we've also got our Tier 3 reading intervention sessions. So these sessions run weekly. Students in this program, 2 30-minute sessions in the week. And they are run during a Monday afternoon home group, and then one other negotiated half 80-minute lesson at the end. Our Tier 3 reading sessions are run by our trained SSOs and Christine, our in-school speech pathologist, all of whom, again, have been trained in Sounds Right. The students who are part of our Tier 3 have some of the lowest ages in RAP. So we try to give that extra support and wrap that extra support around them. So RAP runs for Year 7 and 8, but we do have some Year 9 students who were part of Year 7 and 8 RAP, but they still need that support. So we still have them in the Tier 3 program. Having said that, we haven't always just had the students with the lowest decoding ages. We have had some students who have shown pretty great increase in their decoding age, and it's really, really close to their chronological age. So we've done like what we call a sprint and do a sprint of tier 3 sessions with them to just try to close that gap a little bit quicker. And yep, all our tier 3 staff are trained in the Sounds Right program. And yep, it's a systematic synthetic phonics program, which I said earlier. And we've also included morphology and entomology as part of our RAP program. We've done that to support in building the reading and spelling skills for academic tier 2 and 3 vocabulary. It supports them to break down the meaning of unknown words. So if I've taught them chrono or chrono, they know that that comes from the Greek word chronos, meaning time. So if they come across a word that they're unfamiliar with, if they can just find, oh, I recognize that morpheme, that means time, they're halfway there. So we have added that as well. This is a breakdown of what a general RAP lesson would look like. So we always start with a warm-up. That could be in the form of any type of activity like Stop the Shark, bit similar to Hangman. Find a word, where we've got a grid of letters or sounds, and the kids have to find as many different words as they can with those sounds or letters. And scramble the word, reading, spelling, writing activities, anything to just get them warmed up and going. We always review learning from the previous lesson. Then we have our main body of the lesson where we teach and practice new code. So that could be word building tasks, sound swapping or manipulation, sound stories, polysyllabic words, sentence completion, the list goes on. And then we'll review prior learning. So we always review and apply code already taught, typically at least 2 units prior. So that could be through dictation or through a range of different games. We are always ensuring that we are cycling back and reviewing prior learning to support that transfer to long-term memory using interleaving and space retrieval. And we make use of the same lesson and unit structure for all phonemes and morphemes. It reduces students' cognitive load. It promotes on-task behavior, as they know exactly what it is they're going to be doing. They know what to expect and they know what type of task they're going to be engaging with. So the next few slides are just slides that we've pulled out from a range of different RAP lessons to give you just some practical examples of things that you could do if you were to go down this line. So this is an example of a warm-up, unscramble the mystery word. Each one of those dashes represents a sound, and it's typically a word with a sound that we are looking at that week. Again, another warm-up. We've got the phonemes there for them. You have to rearrange them to create the word, always trying to hit those polysyllabic words just to challenge them. Then we've got word building. So this is kind of the slide that I would just have up on the board. But this is what on the next slide, the actual word building would look like. So as per the Sounds Right script, these are the sounds that I need to make the word pudding, for instance. What is the very first sound you hear? Or let's break up the syllables. What's the first sound you hear in this syllable, then the next syllable? Some teachers like to use the magnets with the sounds already on them, or the graphemes already on them. They don't work well for me. I struggle to take them off the whiteboard, so I tend to use post-it notes. Doesn't look as neat, but is just as effective. And then we obviously practice spelling and writing the words up on the board, as well as the rest of the kids at their desk with their whiteboards. Always have a component of reading and spelling in our lessons. So this particular slide came from the O sound unit. So do a little bit of choral reading, sound out the words, and then read the whole word. So do a couple of rounds of that, obviously with the sounds, with the graphemes being highlighted. Then we'll back that up with words to spell. So I generally say to the kids, I'll say the word, you write the word, underline the grapheme, and then pin your whiteboard. So that's always trying to just drum in as much spelling and reading as we possibly can in the limited time that we have. A lot of word analysis, segmenting polysyllabic words, highlighting the sounds, sorting them out based on their spellings. The next slide is also something similar. Adding in syllables, and we always try as a bit of an extension or a challenge. Choose 5 words and put them in a sentence, and we'll look at the further challenge, see if you can make it into a mini paragraph. Towards the end of the unit, once we've done a lot of that bulk and explicit teaching of the actual sound itself, we tend to take a little bit of a look at comprehension, just seeing as that they are in year 7 and 8, and knowing that they already do have some type of familiarity and awareness of the sounds. And then we've just consolidated it with our explicit teaching. So we've got the sentence completion tasks, find the right word and put it in the right sentence based on its context. And as a team, we have come together and we found that games work really well to engage our students and motivate them. Also, they don't realize that they're practicing the skills and the knowledge we've taught them because they just get caught up in the game. So we as a team have created a range of games on Looker, on Kahoot, This one here on the slide you can see is Jeopardy. Each is tailored to a specific sound. So this one here is the A sound. Just like the TV show, choose a tile, points and column. This group of kids chose the AI spelling. And so a question or a finish the sentence will pop up, also tapping into a little bit of that comprehension as well. If I walk my dog every day, I walk it. Before the answer daily was shown on the board, the kids would have had to discuss it in their little team or their group. They would have had to verbally respond to it and also write it or spell it out on their whiteboard. Then the next other game that is quite popular is Wheel of Fortune. Similar type of premise. You can do this with both phonemes and morphemes. You can say, listen to the word, say the sounds as you spell each syllable, write the whole word, chin it. You can do it with morphemes. You can even say something like, as a very basic example, reinvestigate, highlight the base word. What does the prefix re mean? It can just do that as a review for your morphemes. And then they have to chin it, or you can give them a piece of paper and do it in rounds. You can dangle the carrot in front of them as well, which of whoever gets the most amount of points, you get to leave and go out to recess and lunch first. So that definitely gets the competitive juices flowing. So this is quite a popular one. Kahoot, which I'm sure quite a few of us have already used. We have a range of different Kahoots reviewing sounds. Beauty of Kahoot is you can go back and kind of see what answers were answered correctly and which weren't. Looker is also a really good one. It's very interactive, it's gamified. This particular cohort that I've got at the moment absolutely love cards. So you can play it like Uno or Snap or a memory game. On the far right-hand side there, we've got some talisman cards aligned to decodable text that we use. We've got Alison Clark's Alphabet website has a range of different decks of cards that you can use. Each deck has a specific sound that it focuses on. Alison Clark's website, Alphabet, has a range of different ways that you can play with the cards and has videos to teach you and your students how to play them. They're really quite good. But in any case, no matter what version of the game you play, it will always require the students to read the word during the game. There's a range of different card decks online. They're not very expensive. You just need to download them, print them, and then laminate them, which is probably the most frustrating part. We have our sound stories. So this one here is focused on the sound. We'll read the text together, try to build the kids' confidence in reading out loud to develop their fluency. We try to listen for the sound. We highlight the sound spellings, and then we sort them out based on their spellings. We have found that obviously sometimes decodables or those sound stories aren't always pitched with 13, 14, 15-year-olds in mind. So that's where your good old ChatGPT comes into play for us. So you can ask it to write you a story based on a specific theme or based on a specific sound or group of words. So I just threw in, can you please write me a 100-word story using the following words? All of these words were of a specific sound to try to promote a bit of enjoyment and create a love of reading. We started taking note of all of the different interests that the kids had, whether it be soccer or Fortnite was pretty big a year or two ago. A particular group loves car racing. So you can actually ask ChatGPT to use a certain amount of words, a certain group of words, and then make it based on that topic that you want. So ChatGPT spat that out for me. Of course, use professional judgment, read over your story, make sure it's appropriate on all fronts. ChatGPT doesn't just provide you with fiction text, you can also use it for non-fiction. So I had it write me an article around climate change, and I'm using this as a review because I had to import a range of sounds and morphemes that we previously looked at and learned. So it's got the E sound, it's got the I sound, it's got the A sound, it's got the I-O-N suffix. And of course, there is a few chunky pieces of vocabulary in there as well to just unpack with them. So you can use text like this as well to expose students to more contemporary non-fiction topics. Another slide of dictation. We usually try to do this as a little bit of a review. So that's what is screened up on the board. I obviously don't show them the sentences. I read it out to the kids the first time. I read the sentence out, then I will ask them some questions like, what is the process? What is the verb? Who's the participant? Who is doing the process? When is it happening? Where is it happening? How, why, and so on. And then once we've kind of gone through those questions, then I'll read it out again. And then that is when they'll start writing what it is that I've dictated. A, helps with cognitive load. B, helps with a bit of functional grammar as well. And the next few slides are just some screenshots from our morphology lessons. So we have like an example word, always reminding what's the prefix, what's the suffix. In this instance, we're looking at the prefix multi, its origin, in this case, Latin, what it means. And then we do a range of different activities around that particular morpheme. So on the next couple of slides, you will see that I've got a range of words, and the activity is find the base word and then apply the meaning of the morpheme. How does it change that word? Making use of the gradual release of responsibility. On the next slide, you will see the suffix ly or ly. Obviously, that signals an adverb. So really breaking down what its purpose is, what its function is, how it changes the word. And then the extra part of this activity was what process could this adverb be helping to describe? So what could we be doing slowly, or what could we be doing quietly? Just further aids comprehension. So I've already discussed quite a few of the curriculum materials that you can see up here on your screen. Other games that you can do, Canva has some templates for bingo, so you can make your own bingo cards. Surprisingly, very popular as well. We've got roll and read, so you would partner up, dice, you roll the dice, whatever number your dice lands on, that is the column or the words from that column that you read. Again, we've got taboo, so that one's quite fun. I did that with my year 8s today. I add spelling into that, so not only do the kids have to use their oral language skills and explain what that word is without using a set amount of words, once the child at the front has got it correct, they have to spell it out on their whiteboard and chin it. At the top right-hand corner, you can see a range of different decodables. They are starting to write more decodables that are more appropriate for adolescents, and they're starting to write more non-fiction ones. So Sounds Right just released a series on countries. And Christine and I have just recently downloaded an app that has decodables on it designed for older readers. So we're looking forward to using that. In terms of our planning for RAP, our school makes use of Google Drive, which is really handy because then everyone can access anything at any given point. So we have our termly and yearly planners on Google Drive. Our sequence of learning across the whole year of RAP in terms of our phonics is based on the Sounds Right scope and sequence. The morphology scope and sequence that sits alongside it, we have developed that ourselves. And our initial idea was to match up morphemes with, as you can see, we've got the suffix ly there, and we teach it at the exact same time that we look at the E sounds. So that was our initial idea, to try to match them up where it seemed most common sense. But just like anything, you're always going back and refining and reviewing things. Currently looking at our scope and sequence and making use of a range of resources to edit it, one being South Australia's LGU morphology scope and sequence. And we have termly planning sessions with the RAP team and Tier 3 intervention team. So the Tier 3 intervention team has grown quite a bit this year. So those planning sessions are quite important to us. So all of the tools, all of the things that I just went through on that previous slide, they all support us in ensuring that fidelity is maintained. So it's a consistent framework that planners for both Tier 3 and Tier 2. It's there, it's consistent. We're all using the same planner or the same template. Specifically in RAP, we all know what we're teaching, when we're supposed to teach it, how we're supposed to teach it. And beauty of Google Drive, you can embed all the links. So all of the links to all the different lessons and resources are inbuilt in the planner. It aligns with curriculum goals. The planning sessions are fantastic because it facilitates discussions, allows uninterrupted time where you can just sit there and speak about all things RAP. You can make decisions as a team. You can make decisions about teaching methods or resources that we want or need, any materials that we need moving forward. It supports in monitoring and in terms of quality control, and supports in continuity and predictability. So that way, if one student from next door's RAP class was to walk into my RAP class, it would be predictable, it would be the same, it would be that same level of quality. And we have documented expectations. So everyone in the team knows exactly what to do, when to do, how to do it, and what is expected of them. Likewise, if someone new was to come into the team, it's all there ready to go for them, and we can kind of have a nice seamless induction into the team.
Thank you, Stasha. That was a lot in a very short space of time.
Yes,
very comprehensive. No, it's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of assessment monitoring and reporting, we test students pre, mid and post reading intervention. We measure progress in students' alphabet code knowledge, including vowel digraphs, phonemic awareness, including blending, segmenting and phoneme manipulation. We also use teacher observations and formative assessment during lessons to collect evidence of learning. And as I've already mentioned, you can find more detail about the what and the how and the when of our screening and progress monitoring tools on page 88 of the Reading Guarantee report. Okay, in terms of outcomes, whilst there's always room for improvement, we're pleased with the outcomes we've achieved to date. The average improvement in the decoding age of a student completing the RAP program is around 2 years for students in both Tier 2 and Tier 3 programs. However, the range of improvement can vary considerably across a cohort of students. Some make no progress at all, while others can improve their decoding skills by more than 6 years. As this slide highlights for us, our Year 7s on average last year made 2.5 years progress, while our Year 8s made a more modest average of 7 months progress. Barriers to progress can be poor attendance, wellbeing concerns, and other neurodevelopmental difficulties such as intellectual disability, language disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism, to name a few. Ideally, this group of students would receive daily intervention, although we can't provide that. Some of these students will access more intervention in our Tier 3 sessions, and our Year 7 students still needing to work on improving their reading skills will have the opportunity to continue in RAP in Year 8. We've also observed improvement in students' reading comprehension at the whole school level in response to our multi-tiered system of support as measured by the Progressive Achievement Test in Reading, or PAT-R for short. The PAT-R is an online, largely multiple choice test aligned to the Australian curriculum. It's administered at the whole class level and assesses reading comprehension. Our school administers the PAT-R every year at the same time in Term 3 across all year levels. The data shown in the 3 graphs here represent the test scores achieved by the same cohort of students over 3 years in 2021, 2022 and 2023. What this data set reveals is not only have the lower range of scores increased, but so have the higher range of scores. And we believe this is evidence that our multi-tiered system of support has supported all ability ranges to improve their reading comprehension. And the variance between the lowest and the highest scores has decreased, demonstrating there's been improved equity in reading achievement for this cohort of students. So we're very excited about that. Whilst we have quantitative data to suggest that our Tier 2 and Tier 3 reading intervention programs are effective, we've also looked outside the program for evidence of progress as illustrated in these quotes from some of our students. Student 1 has significant learning difficulties and never really had much success in literature-rich subjects and still struggles in a lot of ways today. However, they've made a lot of progress in RAP and their confidence increased post-intervention. They explained, and their English teacher confirmed, how the skills learnt in RAP had improved their confidence and ability to both read and spell increasingly complex words in all subject areas, but particularly in English. And student 1 told us, "I know how to say difficult words, but I normally don't know how to spell them. I can spell them now after I was in that program." And student 2 is still developing their proficiency in English. Student 2 told us, "It helped me understand English better. For example, learning the sounds helped me read more words and improved my reading overall. RAP improved my reading skills, so things became easier for me in my other classes. I wasn't struggling anymore to read texts given to me in other classes because of RAP." And our teachers have told us they've also seen evidence of positive outcomes, like the changes described in this quote from our English coordinator. Students who graduate from the RAP program have a profound improvement in their confidence as they engage with the mainstream English curriculum, as they have the knowledge and skills needed to access year-level content. They take decoding skills learnt with them as they move through middle school into senior school. For some of these students, after being part of the RAP program, it means for the first time they're working at the same level as their peers, and you can see how this greatly increases their sense of accomplishment and self. Students are also willing to ask for help from their teachers as they know the benefit that additional support has for them. The impact of the RAP program goes beyond measurable data sets, our English coordinator. And we're almost to the end. I'm going to hand you over to Kirsty and then Stasha now to share some lessons learned so far.
Okay, so one of the biggest lessons that we learned is that you have to work as a team, and all people in the team need to be supported in the same way and be supportive of each other. And I'm pleased to report that that is exactly what's happened. What that means is that developing a mutually supportive staff culture, each person is comfortable sharing their successes, but they're also comfortable in sharing the challenges. And the people in the team are really keen to support a mutual problem-solving, culture, and there's no judgment, which is excellent. Funding has been challenging at times. I'll just show you. The funding slide. So we have, in South Australia, we have a grant which is about inclusive education support programs. So we use some of our money from that to fund a buy-in speech pathologist, and that has been a huge investment that far outweighs the cost. Christine's expertise means that all of our staff have had the access to the literacy screening reports and what they mean and how to use them. And we feel really, really pleased with that. We have been able to provide Sounds Right training for 12 teachers and 10 ancillary staff. It looks, again, quite expensive, but those people mean that the program is delivered with skill, and it allows the continuity of the program, which wouldn't otherwise be possible. We have funded small classes. So as Stasha spoke about before, there's a team teaching model. We have 3 classes of 16 and each class has an SSO. Same with RAP and LAP. Again, that's about double the amount of cost in terms of staffing, but the investment made and the results achieved far outweigh the cost. And there you can see that we have also spent some money on physical resources and testing. The other thing that is really, really important is the approach that we've taken to whole school professional development. So the model that we use is we support our leaders to do some learning, then we support the whole staff, and what that means is that all staff have a range of people that they can go to if they need to check in about anything. Stasha and others have developed a set of info which allows us to continually go back to the training, but not have to read through the detail, but it will just jog our memory, but also link all of our documents so that people can easily access what is needed. And it has been highly resourced. So again, Stasha and others have developed a set of resources such as cards that people can check their understanding about the vocab instructional routine, or what a simple sentence is, what a complex sentence is, what a binding conjunction is, what a morpheme is, what etymology means, all of those sorts of things, where if you haven't traditionally been required to use that sort of language, it's easy for us to access the support. So really important to the success of the program. Over to Stasha.
In terms of staff training and support when it comes to our intervention program, you're committed to staff training and that you support staff in the development of their knowledge and skills. Otherwise, there's only so far that the program and the kids' learning will go. On that as well, sometimes attrition can be a bit of a problem. So you got to kind of stick with it and do your best to work with it. I think we've all kind of felt the pinch of the teacher shortage, so I'm sure you're all understanding exactly what it is that I mean. We have had some staff turnover like many other schools. So we've had to ensure that we have trained new staff coming in, but they will also train enough staff so that as people leave, we still have staff on site that can still run the program and staff the program. So that's definitely something that you need to keep in mind when organising and structuring your programs. In terms of lessons learned with the teaching models, I think I touched on that earlier in the session. Team teaching model, definitely effective, definitely something that we would recommend, provided that resourcing allows it. And that bottom one there about motivating and engaging struggling readers, we've had a range of different people and teachers and schools come in and observe our RAP program and have some chats with us, and they all ask the exact same thing. How do you break that stigma of being in a reading intervention program? How do you create motivation? So in terms of that stigma, you kind of need to break it down and just blow it up and throw it out the window. That just because you're in a reading intervention program doesn't reflect anything about you. It just means you just need that little bit of extra support. I know if you threw me in a music class, I would need a ton of support. So we try to put it out like that. And I think having some very honest, frank conversations with the kids as to what the program actually is, why it's actually been created, why they are in the program, and how they can benefit from it, and not just making links in terms of benefits for school, making those links of how they're going to benefit in the real world, and where they will need reading and spelling out in the real world. Even something as simple as, you ask them all, when you turn 16, do you want to go get your driver's license? And every single hand will pop up. And none of them realize that it's actually a test that you need to read before you even actually get in the car. So making all of those real life connections, or who has allergies when you go to a restaurant. So once you make all the real life connections, which seems to be the much more successful route about getting them engaged and getting them on board, you can see the cogs starting to turn in their brains, and then they're more willing to engage. And then when they're engaging, they're actually learning. So then when they're learning, then they're experiencing more success. Like, oh, well, this is great. I'm actually getting something right. And then the more success they experience and the more engaged they become, the more motivated they become. And then it's just a bit of a flow-on effect after that. And just to add one little bit, of course, adding age-appropriate activities, games, tasks also definitely helps things along as well. So lessons learned from us.
Our presentation tonight. If you'd like to know more about our multi-tiered system of support approach, you can go to the Reading Guarantee report, to those pages listed there, or you might like to visit the Aero website to watch some videos made by the Aero team during a visit to our school last year on leading and building an effective MTSS approach in a secondary setting. So I'm going to say, on behalf of us, thank you for sharing our journey, and back to you, Amy.
Goodness, thank you so much, Kirsty, Christine, and Stasha. That was an impressively comprehensive whirlwind tour of all that you've done in the last few years. We are at time, so I feel like we will end the session there. I've attempted to answer some of the questions that were lingering in the chat. I could tell that some of them were being answered as you were speaking, so I left them be. But if you do have further questions, do feel free to reach out to us at Grattan, and we'll see if we can point you in the right direction. Of course, a huge thank you to the team at Parafields for sharing and being so generous with sharing your work. This is the second Grattan webinar in a series that we have with our case study schools from our Reading Guarantee report. This webinar will be up online on Grattan's YouTube channel, and you can also see the previous one that we did with Churchill Primary School up there as well. If you want to see any of Grattan's work, it's freely available on our website, grattan.edu.au. If you want to donate to support future Grattan reports, you're also welcome to do that there. I will wrap up there and let everyone get back to their evening. Thank you so much again to Parafields, to Kirsty, to Christine, to Stasha, and sharing their amazing work. And thank you to everyone for joining. Have a good evening.